Bitcoin's meant to be. I'm not going to be sending, I can send the payment to the network. There are use cases for that. But in most payments, Jimmy will. Why? Because money's not about forcing someone to take your money. It's about going through a normal payment process. Bitcoin's modeled on the real world, not some crypto-anarchist dream of what they think the world should be. It's based on how people actually interact.
And so we would not live in a world where people are keeping track of these lists of long Bitcoin addresses as they do today, because that's not how Bitcoin was designed in the very beginning.
Exactly. And see, one of the reasons why this actually went that way is with anonymous systems and wanting to be able to give money and have plausible deniability and anonymity and all the rest, then I could force someone to take money, and I could basically have a system where I cannot say where the money came from. But with the way I envision Bitcoin, Jimmy can actually build something into the transaction, maybe an encrypted nonce or something like that, an invoice number, details that say Craig Wright and Jimmy did this transaction. And Jimmy can now account for that.
Yeah. In my auditing and books and records that I have to keep as a business. All right, we've been going a long time, so let's wrap up with just a final few questions about your experience with China and your relationship with China. This is not the first time you've come to China to speak about Bitcoin, is it? In fact, I believe you were here about 10 years ago in Beijing.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
I was here in December again, where it was nice and cold.
You like it cold in Beijing.
In Beijing in 2010. So back when Satoshi wasn't posting much and disappeared for a little while, I was here in China. And I was presenting a series of papers as an obscure academic. One of them was on SIR propagation, epidemic models, and Poisson sort of modeling of networks, etc.
For the audience who doesn't know what that is, what is SEIR propagation?
So in this one, it was SIR, which is susceptible, infected, recovering, which is a way of modeling sort of epidemics, like in...
like viruses.
Viruses. So I studied statistics in the University of Newcastle, and a lot of what I did was some financial statistics, but mainly medical statistics. So epidemiology and propagation of viruses over network systems. So modeling how basically viruses and things like that spread around society for epidemics. And actually, this is the interesting thing. It's also how packets distribute around things like the internet. So there's this exact correlation, especially if you make a gossip network.
And so who were you speaking to when you came here?
So I was speaking to at a conference here, run by one of the main universities here in Beijing, and basically I came out to try and present a number of different topics, and got the sort of normal, no one really understood, interesting mathematics and have a nice day type thing, and no one really understood what I was talking about. When I was talking about applications in audit and whatever else, all the mathematicians and statisticians sort of glazed over and went, audit, ugh.
Yeah. Did you talk about Bitcoin?
I talked to a few people about Bitcoin, but no one understood it once again. I think the first time I actually talked about Bitcoin was actually, before I launched Bitcoin, was with a professor from University of Berkeley when I was in India in 2008, just before I launched Bitcoin. And unfortunately, she understood blockchain, which isn't the unfortunate bit. The unfortunate bit, she now works on Ethereum.
Well, she'll come over soon, I'm sure. What did you think of Beijing then?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I like China.
What do you like about China?
It's big, it's dynamic, it's a whole lot of people who want to get ahead in the world, It's a thriving city of about 30 million people. It's alive. It's interesting. We could get a little bit less smog, but, well, LA had smog in the past too. So all that gets cleared up eventually.
Well, you clearly have a lot of respect and love for Asian cultures. You named Bitcoin under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, Japanese. Your wife is Singaporean Chinese. Your children are part Chinese as well. Why do you think, and people sometimes don't, they didn't expect, of course, Satoshi Nakamoto to be white. So why do you think you have this interest and appreciation for Chinese culture in particular, as well as all Asian cultures? And then there's me.
I have a respect for a number of cultures throughout society. In the West, it would be Rome. I think Rome as a republic, before it started going down the empire route, was a magnificent culture, a culture of engineering and creation. Not one that people have respect for anymore because they look at Greece and go, oh, the Greeks were much more artistic, like the French or whatever else now. Well, at the end of the day, the same was part of China, part of other cultures, even Korea, Japan, etc. They were all cultures of creation at one stage. Unfortunately, they were all cultures that isolated themselves for a long time, leading to decay before now they're realizing that they need to open up and connect to the world again. And China led the world for a long time. I don't think people remember, but these little ships that that Genovese guy Columbus sailed across to America, they were small. They were pitiful little tiny bathtub-sized things. China had these massive boats that were something like 5 or 6 times the size, and they sailed to America and got to the West Coast and saw California and then went, no, we don't want to be here.
Hey.
And they sailed to Africa and everything like that. Yep. And unfortunately, you had a bunch of eunuchs who snip, snip, tuck, tuck, and Bob's your auntie, and they decided to try and take over, and the emperor at the time decided, well, if that's what's going to happen when people go overseas and they come back with these silly ideas, I'm going to close off my country, which unfortunately led to China being isolated. Instead of being the dynamic place it was until the 14th and 15th century, it closed and stagnated. But now it's opening up again. So it closed for a while again, following the horrible time between, say, 1840 and about 1906, where the British and everyone else in Europe did some despicable, horrible things with opium and everything like that to control China and force them to sell silver. China has basically gone through a series of growing and awakening and has opened up. And since the 80s, it has gone through this phase where it's understood that it needs to allow people to want to build and earn and create. And it's opening up again. And in some ways, people don't seem to understand, but China's sort of more libertarian and free within China than America is now. There are less regulations on many things, and there's good and bad to that. There's a reason why the Chinese government just the other day bought one of the biggest dairy industries in Australia, actually, in Tasmania, which closed earlier this week for a few $1 billion. And that's because, well, dairy over here is not trusted because of regulations, and you trust the guys in Australia. So you now bought all our milk, so milk is something that's going out of Australia into China. Why? Because you're open and free, and you get choice. And people don't get that. There's a difference between freedom and rules and freedom to trade and freedom of regulation, and it's actually becoming more and more open and more sort of with the ability to do many things, and nothing's perfect, and the reality is everyone's trying and growing, and sometimes people fail and sometimes people succeed, but what I'm seeing is growth in education and learning. The thing that I want to really see change is America still produces more PhDs than China. And I think that's wrong. I think you guys can do better. You have a lot of people here with the ability to learn, to work hard, and I want to see China have more people with doctorates than the US. You've got more population. I don't want to see 3 times. I want to see 4 or 5 times the number of doctorates. I want to see you guys really show just how educated you can be. Show the damn Americans up.
So you really respect the culture here that values building, creating, earning, which is very consistent with our mission in Bitcoin SV.
Well, yes.
What do you think of all of the development that has been exploding here in China on Bitcoin SV this year?
I think it's remarkable. So right back from sort of the early phases of Confucius, and you had this system where people would be educated, would have to do exams, would have to prove themselves to get into civil service even. And I see that starting again. I see people wanting to learn. I see people in Asian universities working harder than anyone ever will anymore in the West. When I was teaching a while back now, most of my students were Asian, because I was one of these buggers of a lecturer who had the hard subjects and didn't make easy exams, which meant only Asian students seemed to want to actually learn from me. But that's a good thing. I want to see people work hard, because when you work hard, you learn more. And when you learn more, you can achieve more. That simple.
So you've always said that you created Bitcoin to be the foundation, the protocol, but that you were never going to build everything on Bitcoin, that it's up to everyone else in the world. With a room full of some of the great entrepreneurs and developers who believe in your message and are building on BSV, your design originally of Bitcoin, what do you want to tell them as they embark on their journeys with BSV?
I built something that is hard because it's simple. Simple is really the hardest thing many people get out there. Something that is not complex, something that is minimal. It now allows you to build things on top of it, overlay networks and more. You can build something where you can earn money, where you can track connections, and where you don't need to sell your soul to advertising or government monitoring. Bitcoin enables so much. Micropayments enable so much. I can never imagine a billionth of what will be created. So as much as I do, and I've got a little over 1,500 white papers that'll go to patent now in the office, as much as I do, it's not even a % of what all you guys can create. When you get a room full of smart people